Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hold On Survival Stories. I'm your host, and how are you all doing today? I hope you're having an incredible day and you're ready for another absolutely mind-blowing survival story. Because today's episode is going to take you to one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Before we dive in, I want to give a massive thank you to everyone who's been supporting our channel. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions mean the world to me and help us bring you these incredible real-life survival stories every week. And for those of you who are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because, trust me, you don't want to miss any of these amazing stories. Now today, we're heading to the roof of the world, the Himalayas, for a story that will show you just how quickly a dream expedition can become a fight against the most brutal forces nature can unleash. This story will demonstrate how mountaineering experience and survival instincts can mean the difference between life and death, how the human spirit can endure in conditions that would kill most people within hours, and how sometimes the mountain itself becomes both your greatest enemy and your only shelter. You'll witness how 5 days alone at extreme altitude can test every limit of human endurance, and how the determination to see loved ones again can keep someone alive when the death zone lives up to its terrifying name. This is the story of 32-year-old Alex Morrison, an experienced mountaineer who became separated from his expedition team during a sudden storm in the Himalayas, and how his climbing knowledge and unbreakable will to survive turned 5 days in the death zone into an incredible testament to human resilience. By the end of this story, you'll understand why preparation, altitude experience, and never accepting defeat can overcome even when you're alone on the world's deadliest mountains. So grab your favorite warm drink, get comfortable, and let's dive into this absolutely incredible tale of survival at the top of the world. Monday morning, October 9th, 2023, dawned crystal clear and bitterly cold at 17,500 feet above sea level in the Khumbu region of Nepal. For 32-year-old Alex Morrison, a software engineer from Seattle and passionate mountaineer, it was the beginning of what he had planned to be the adventure of a lifetime. A 3-week expedition to attempt Amadablam, one of the most technically challenging and beautiful peaks in the Himalayas. Alex had been climbing mountains for 12 years, progressing from local peaks in the Cascade Range to increasingly challenging expeditions around the world. He had summited Mount Rainier 15 times, completed technical climbs in Alaska and Patagonia, and had even reached 22,000 feet on Denali. But Amadablam, standing at 22,349 feet with its knife-edge ridges and technical rock climbing, represented the culmination of everything he had been training for. The expedition team consisted of 6 climbers from around the world, led by renowned Sherpa guide Pemba Murbu, who had summited Everest 8 times and knew the Khumbu region better than almost anyone alive. Alex's teammates included Maria Santos from Spain, Dr. James Park from South Korea, twins Eric and Lars Nielsen from Norway, and Sarah Williams from Australia. All experienced high-altitude climbers with impressive resumes. Alex's preparation for this expedition had been meticulous and comprehensive. He had spent 18 months training specifically for high-altitude climbing, including multiple trips to elevation in Colorado and California. His gear was top of the line, an expedition weight down suit rated for temperatures below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, high-altitude mountaineering boots, technical climbing equipment, and emergency gear including a GPS device with satellite communication capability. Most importantly, Alex had undergone extensive altitude acclimatization training, He understood that above 18,000 feet, the human body begins to deteriorate rapidly due to oxygen deprivation, and that proper acclimatization could mean the difference between success and death. The expedition plan included careful altitude gains with rest days for acclimatization, following protocols that had been proven safe over decades of Himalayan climbing. That Monday morning, the team was at Camp 2, their advanced base camp located on a snow ledge carved into the mountain at 17,500 feet. They had been climbing for 8 days, following a careful acclimatization schedule that had taken them from the village of Namche Bazaar at 11,300 feet up to their current position. Everyone was feeling strong and well acclimatized, and the weather forecast looked favorable for their summit attempt. Alex's personal preparation was exceptional, even by mountaineering standards. His pack contained enough food for 5 days, a high-efficiency stove and fuel, emergency shelter, comprehensive first aid supplies, and multiple navigation devices. He carried 3 different communication devices, a satellite phone, a GPS communicator, and emergency radio beacons. His climbing experience had taught him that redundancy in critical equipment could save your life when everything else went wrong. The plan for October 9th was relatively straightforward. The team would move from Camp 2 to Camp 3 at 19,200 feet, spend the night acclimatizing, and then make their summit attempt the following day. The weather window looked perfect: clear skies, moderate winds, and stable conditions that could last for several days. What Alex and his teammates didn't know was that a massive storm system was developing over the Tibetan Plateau, moving faster and more intensely than any weather forecast had predicted. The storm would bring hurricane-force winds, temperatures dropping below -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility reduced to 0. Conditions that would turn their carefully planned expedition into a desperate fight for survival. At 8 a.m., Alex shouldered his 40-pound pack and began climbing toward Camp 3, surrounded by some of the most spectacular mountain scenery on Earth. The route led up steep snow and ice faces, across knife-edge ridges with 1,000-foot drops on both sides, and through technical rock sections that required advanced climbing skills. For the first 4 hours, everything went perfectly according to plan. The team moved efficiently up the mountain, maintaining good spacing and communication. Alex felt strong and well acclimatized, enjoying the incredible physical and mental challenge of high-altitude technical climbing. At 12:30 p.m., while climbing a particularly exposed ridge section at approximately 18,800 feet, Alex noticed something that made his blood run cold. A wall of dark clouds building rapidly on the western horizon, moving towards their position with frightening speed. Pemba Norbu, their experienced Sherpa guide, immediately recognized the danger. "Storm coming fast," he shouted, over the increasing wind. "We need to get to shelter immediately." But they were in the worst possible location, exposed on a narrow ridge with no shelter options for hundreds of feet in any direction. The storm was moving faster than they could climb to safety, and within minutes, Alex Morrison would find himself alone in conditions that killed even experienced mountaineers within hours. At 12:45 p.m., 15 minutes after Pemba first spotted the approaching storm, the weather hit their exposed position with the fury that only Himalayan storms can unleash. The wind went from moderate to hurricane force in seconds, creating a whiteout that reduced visibility to less than 10 feet. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in minutes, and the combination of wind and snow created conditions where exposed skin would freeze in seconds. Alex was roped to Maria Santos, approximately 50 feet behind him on the narrow ridge, when the storm struck with full force. The wind was so powerful that it literally knocked him off his feet, and he found himself sliding down the steep snow face on the south side of the ridge, held only by the climbing rope connecting him to Maria. "Maria," Alex shouted into the howling wind, but his voice was completely swallowed by the storm. He could see nothing but swirling snow and ice, and the rope between them was jerking violently as Maria fought to maintain her position on the ridge above. What happened next would haunt Alex for the rest of his life. A powerful wind gust, estimated later to have exceeded 100 miles per hour, hit the ridge where Maria was anchored. Alex felt the rope go slack for a terrifying moment, then snap tight with tremendous force as Maria was also blown off the ridge, but instead of being pulled together, they were blown in opposite directions by the chaotic wind patterns around the mountain. The climbing rope, rated to hold thousands of pounds under normal conditions, simply couldn't withstand the combination of hurricane-force winds, sub-zero temperatures, and the shock loading from two climbers being blown in different directions. Alex heard a sharp crack that he felt more than heard, and suddenly he was sliding down the mountain alone, no longer connected to Maria or anyone else. Alex managed to arrest his fall using his ice axe after sliding approximately 200 feet down a steep snow slope. When he finally stopped, gasping and shaken, he found himself in a small depression that provided minimal shelter from the worst of the wind, but he was completely alone, with no idea where his teammates were or how to reach them in the whiteout conditions. Alex immediately tried his communication devices, but the storm was interfering with all electronic equipment. His satellite phone showed no signal. His GPS communicator was unable to establish satellite contact, and his radio received only static. He was alone on one of the world's most dangerous mountains in the middle of a storm that was quickly becoming life-threatening. The first critical decision Alex faced was whether to try to climb back up to the ridge to search for his teammates or to seek shelter and wait for the storm to pass. His mountaineering training told him that moving in whiteout conditions was very dangerous. He could easily walk off a cliff or become even more lost. But staying in his current position, exposed to hurricane-force winds and rapidly dropping temperatures, was also potentially fatal. Alex chose to seek better shelter, carefully moving across the slope while staying at the same elevation to avoid getting further from his last known position. After 30 minutes of careful movement, he found a small rock outcropping that provided partial protection from the wind. It wasn't ideal shelter, but it was significantly better than being completely exposed. At 2 p.m., Alex took inventory of his situation with the clinical assessment that had kept him alive during previous climbing emergencies. He was alone at approximately 18,600 feet elevation, in a storm with hurricane-force winds and temperatures that his thermometer showed had dropped to minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit. His teammates were missing, his communication equipment was non-functional, and his radio received only static. He was alone on one of the world's most dangerous mountains, in the middle of a storm that was quickly becoming life-threatening. As the brutal Himalayan night descended on October 9th, Alex Morrison faced temperatures that dropped to -45 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills approaching -70 degrees Fahrenheit. Conditions cold enough to freeze exposed skin in less than a minute and kill an unprepared person within hours. His small shelter behind the rock outcropping provided crucial protection from the worst of the wind, but it was still a life-or-death battle to maintain body temperature through the 14-hour mountain night. Alex's survival strategy for the first night was based on principles he had learned through years of winter mountaineering: minimize heat loss, maintain circulation, stay hydrated, and conserve energy while staying alert for signs of hypothermia or frostbite. Every decision he made would either help him survive until dawn or contribute to a slow death from cold exposure. At 6 p.m., Alex carefully rationed his first meal since the storm began: a single energy bar and hot tea made by melting snow on his small stove. The warm liquid was crucial, not just for hydration, but for providing internal heat that helped maintain his core body temperature. Alex knew that dehydration at altitude could be as dangerous as hypothermia, and that his body needed calories to fuel the massive energy expenditure required to stay warm. The psychological challenge of the first night was almost as difficult as the physical battle against cold. Alex found himself completely cut off from human contact for the first time in his life, surrounded by the constant roar of wind and the knowledge that he was in one of the most isolated and dangerous places on Earth. The darkness was complete. Not the darkness of a room at night, but the absolute blackness of a mountain storm where no light existed anywhere. Alex fought off panic and despair by focusing on immediate, concrete tasks, checking his extremities for signs of frostbite, adjusting his shelter to minimize heat loss, monitoring his stove to ensure safe operation in the confined space, and calculating his resources to plan for multiple days of survival. Keeping his mind engaged with practical problems prevented him from dwelling on the terrifying reality of his situation. At 6 p.m., 4 hours into the night, Alex experienced his first serious equipment crisis. His stove, which was providing crucial heat and the ability to melt snow for water, began malfunctioning due to the extreme cold affecting the fuel system. Without the stove, Alex would lose his primary heat source and his ability to create drinking water from snow. Drawing on his technical background and mountaineering experience, Alex spent over an hour troubleshooting the stove problem in the cramped confines of his shelter. The solution required disassembling the fuel system, warming the components against his body to restore proper function, and carefully reassembling everything while wearing thick gloves in near darkness. The repair was successful, but it demonstrated how quickly equipment failures could turn his difficult situation into a fatal one. At midnight, Alex faced the psychological low point of his first night. The combination of extreme cold, sleep deprivation, altitude effects, and isolation was creating a mental state that mountaineers call summit fever in reverse, an overwhelming desire to abandon safety protocols and make dangerous decisions just to escape the current situation. Alex found himself seriously considering leaving his shelter to search for his teammates in the storm, even though he knew that moving in whiteout conditions was essentially suicide. The urge to do something rather than wait passively in his shelter was almost irresistible, driven by the psychological stress of his situation.
Alex overcame this crisis by using mental techniques he had learned from sports psychology, breaking down his survival into small, manageable goals rather than thinking about the overwhelming big picture. Instead of thinking, "I need to survive 5 days alone on a mountain," he focused on, "I need to stay warm for the next hour, then reassess." At 2 a.m., Alex discovered that his water bottles had begun freezing despite being kept inside his sleeping bag. This was a serious problem because dehydration at altitude could quickly lead to altitude sickness, poor decision-making, and reduced physical performance. Alex had to wake up every 2 hours throughout the night to warm his water bottles against his body and operate his stove to melt additional snow. The sleep deprivation from this schedule was brutal, but Alex knew that staying hydrated was crucial for survival. Each time he woke up, he also checked his extremities for signs of frostbite, moved around inside his shelter to maintain circulation, and assessed his mental state for signs of altitude-related cognitive impairment. At 4 a.m., Alex heard something that gave him the first hope he had felt since the storm began. The wind was starting to diminish. After more than 15 hours of hurricane-force winds, the storm appeared to be weakening. If the wind continued to decrease and visibility improved, he might be able to move from his shelter and attempt to either find his teammates or navigate to a safer location. But Alex knew that Himalayan weather could change quickly, and that moving too early could be just as dangerous as staying too long. He needed to wait for truly safe conditions before abandoning the shelter that had kept him alive through the worst night of his life. At 6 a.m., after 12 hours in his emergency shelter, Alex saw the first gray light of dawn filtering through the storm clouds. He had survived his first night alone in the Himalayas, but he was also beginning to feel the cumulative effects of extreme altitude, cold exposure, and stress. His food and fuel supplies were holding up well, but he knew that each day would be more challenging than the last as his physical condition gradually deteriorated. As the wind continued to decrease and visibility slowly improved, Alex began planning his next moves. He needed to either find his teammates, locate a better shelter, or begin descending toward lower altitude where survival would be more manageable. But all of these options required making life-or-death navigation decisions in terrain where a single mistake could send him over a cliff or into a crevasse. Alex Morrison had survived his first night alone in the death zone, but he still had potentially 4 more days of survival ahead of him before rescue could reach his location.
Tuesday morning, October 10th, brought Alex Morrison his first clear view of his surroundings since the storm had separated him from his team 22 hours earlier. As the wind diminished and visibility improved, he could see that he was in far more dangerous terrain than he had realized during the whiteout conditions of the previous day. Alex discovered he was on a narrow snow ledge, approximately 200 feet below the main climbing route, surrounded by steep ice faces that dropped thousands of feet toward the glacier below. Above him, the route back to the main ridge appeared technically challenging and potentially unstable after the storm. Below him, the terrain was too steep and dangerous for safe descent without technical climbing equipment that he didn't have readily accessible. Most concerning, Alex could see no signs of his teammates anywhere in the vast mountain landscape spread out below him. The storm had blown him much further from the original route than he had realized, and his teammates could be anywhere within several square miles of incredibly dangerous terrain. Even if they had survived the storm, finding each other without communication equipment would be nearly impossible.
At 8 a.m., Alex made his first critical navigation decision. Instead of attempting to climb back up to the main route immediately, he would traverse across the mountain face to reach a more stable area where he could assess his options and attempt to repair his communication equipment. The traverse would be dangerous, but staying on his current narrow ledge was not a long-term solution. The traverse took Alex over 3 hours to complete, moving carefully across steep snow slopes where a fall would be fatal. His mountaineering skills and experience served him well, but the combination of high altitude, extreme cold, and the stress of his situation made every movement more difficult than it would normally be. By 11 a.m., Alex had reached a more stable area with better shelter options and a clearer view of the surrounding terrain. From his new position, Alex could see the broader geography of his situation, and the view was sobering. He was approximately 2 miles from the main climbing route, separated by terrain that would require technical climbing to cross safely. More importantly, he could see that the storm had left fresh avalanche debris across many of the slopes between him and potential rescue routes, making navigation even more dangerous. Alex spent the rest of Tuesday trying to repair his communication equipment and establish his exact position using the GPS functionality that was still working on one of his devices. The GPS showed that he was at 18,400 feet elevation, approximately 1.5 miles northwest of where he should have been according to his planned route. This information was crucial for planning his survival strategy and potential self-rescue. The second night was even more challenging than the first. Alex's body was beginning to show the cumulative effects of extreme altitude exposure. Persistent headaches, nausea, difficulty sleeping, and reduced appetite that made it hard to consume the calories he needed for energy. These were classic symptoms of high-altitude deterioration, and Alex knew that they would only get worse the longer he remained above 18,000 feet. Thursday, October 11th, brought both hope and new challenges. The weather had cleared enough for Alex to see aircraft in the distance, search helicopters that indicated rescue teams were looking for the missing expedition members. Alex immediately began using every signaling method he had: a signaling mirror, bright-colored clothing arranged in patterns visible from the air, and emergency flares when aircraft appeared to be within range. But the helicopters were searching areas several miles away, following the planned expedition route, where rescuers logically assumed the missing climbers would be found. Alex's position, blown far off route by the storm, was outside the initial search area. Despite hours of signaling attempts, none of the helicopters came close enough to spot him. Wednesday afternoon brought Alex's most serious crisis since the storm began. While attempting to move to a better signaling position, he triggered a small avalanche that swept him approximately 300 feet down the mountain before he managed to arrest his slide using his ice axe. The fall left him with bruised ribs and a twisted ankle, but more seriously, it separated him from his backpack containing most of his food, fuel, and emergency equipment. Alex spent over 4 hours searching for his lost pack in the avalanche debris, finally locating it buried under 3 feet of snow. The recovery effort exhausted him and used up precious daylight, but without his equipment, survival would have been impossible. The incident demonstrated how quickly his situation could deteriorate from difficult to hopeless. By Thursday, October 12th, Alex was experiencing serious effects from 4 days at extreme altitude. His appetite had disappeared almost completely, making it difficult to consume enough calories to maintain body heat and energy. His sleep was fragmented and unrestful due to periodic breathing, a common altitude effect where breathing stops and starts during sleep. Most concerning, he was beginning to experience mild cognitive impairment that made navigation decisions more difficult. Alex realized that he couldn't survive indefinitely at his current altitude. Even with adequate food and fuel, the human body begins to deteriorate rapidly above 18,000 feet, and he was already showing signs of serious altitude-related health problems. He needed to either be rescued soon or begin descending to lower altitude, even if that meant moving away from potential rescue routes. Thursday afternoon brought Alex his most serious crisis since the storm began. While signaling to another distant helicopter, he managed to catch the attention of the aircraft crew using a combination of his signaling mirror and emergency flares. The helicopter altered course toward his position, and for the first time in 5 days, Alex made visual contact with other human beings. But the helicopter's approach also revealed the next challenge. His position was too dangerous for helicopter landing or even close approach. The pilot managed to hover near Alex's location long enough to drop a supply package containing food, medical supplies, and a radio, but the terrain made immediate rescue impossible. Through the radio, Alex learned the devastating news about his teammates. Maria Santos had been found deceased, apparently killed by the fall when the rope broke during the storm. The other expedition members had survived, but had suffered severe frostbite and altitude sickness. Alex was the only team member still missing, and rescue efforts had been focused on areas far from his actual location. The rescue coordinator explained that helicopter extraction from Alex's position would require specialized equipment and favorable weather conditions that might not occur for several days. Alex would need to either descend to a safer location for pickup or survive in his current position with adequate supplies but continued exposure to the life-threatening effects of extreme altitude.
Friday morning, October 13th, marked Alex Morrison's 5th day alone in the Himalayas and the beginning of what would be the most dangerous phase of his entire ordeal. After his radio contact with the rescue helicopter, Alex had learned that his only realistic chance of survival was to descend approximately 2,000 feet to a location where helicopter rescue would be possible. The descent would take him through some of the most treacherous terrain in the Himalayas, but staying at his current altitude was no longer survivable. Alex's physical condition after 4 days above 18,000 feet was seriously deteriorated. He had lost approximately 15 pounds from a combination of altitude-induced appetite loss and the massive caloric demands of staying warm in extreme conditions. His resting heart rate had increased from his normal 65 beats per minute to over 100, indicating that his cardiovascular system was under severe stress from altitude and dehydration. Most concerning were the cognitive effects Alex was experiencing. Simple decisions that should have been automatic now required conscious effort and concentration. He found himself stopping frequently to remember what he was doing or which direction he was supposed to be moving. These symptoms indicated that his brain was not receiving adequate oxygen and that his judgment might be compromised at exactly the time when perfect decision-making was crucial for survival. At 9 a.m., Alex began his descent toward the helicopter landing zone that rescue coordinators had identified at approximately 16,400 feet. Still extremely high altitude, but low enough for helicopter operations and significantly safer for long-term survival. The route would require him to navigate steep snow slopes, cross several avalanche zones, and traverse exposed rock faces where a fall would be fatal.
Alex's mountaineering experience served him well during the early stages of the descent. He moved carefully and methodically, using proper climbing techniques to manage the difficult terrain. But the combination of altitude effects, fatigue, and the weight of his pack made every movement more challenging than it would be normally. What should have been a 4-hour descent stretched into an all-day epic that would test every skill he had learned in 12 years of mountaineering. At 9:30 a.m., while descending a steep snow slope, Alex triggered his second avalanche in 3 days. This slide was larger and more dangerous than the first, carrying him over 400 feet down the mountain at high speed. Alex managed to maintain control during the slide and avoid being buried, but the avalanche swept him far off his intended route and into terrain that was even more challenging to navigate. The avalanche incident left Alex in a deep couloir, a steep, narrow gully between rock walls that offered protection from wind but created new dangers from rockfall and limited escape routes. Alex spent over an hour assessing his new situation and planning a route that would get him out of the couloir and back on track toward the rescue zone. At 2 p.m., Alex faced his most technically challenging climbing of the entire ordeal. Escaping from the couloir required ascending a near vertical ice wall approximately 80 feet high. Under normal circumstances, this would be a moderate technical climb for someone with Alex's skills. But at extreme altitude, exhausted and alone, it became a life or death test of his climbing ability. Alex spent 45 minutes carefully climbing the ice wall, placing ice screws for protection and managing his energy to avoid exhaustion that could lead to a fatal fall. When he finally reached the top of the wall and pulled himself over the edge, he was closer to complete physical collapse than at any point during his 5-day ordeal. At 4 p.m., Alex reached 17,200 feet and could see the helicopter landing zone still 800 feet below him. He was making progress toward rescue, but he was also approaching complete physical exhaustion. His legs were shaking from fatigue, his breathing was labored even while resting, and he was experiencing episodes of dizziness that made movement on exposed terrain extremely dangerous. Alex made the critical decision to rest for 2 hours, consuming food and water to restore some energy before attempting the final section of his descent. This rest probably saved his life, as the final 800 feet would prove to be the most treacherous terrain of his entire descent. At 6 p.m., as daylight began to fade, Alex started down the final steep section toward the helicopter landing zone. The route led across loose rock slopes where every step triggered small rockfalls, and the approaching darkness made it difficult to see safe footing. Alex was moving on determination alone, his body running on reserves that were nearly exhausted. At 7:30 p.m., just as darkness was making further movement impossible, Alex Morrison reached the helicopter landing zone at 16,400 feet. He had descended over 2,000 feet of some of the most dangerous terrain in the Himalayas, navigating avalanche zones, technical climbing sections, and loose rock slopes while suffering from severe altitude effects and exhaustion. Alex immediately activated his emergency beacon and radio to signal his arrival at the pickup zone. The rescue coordinator confirmed that a helicopter would attempt extraction first thing in the morning, weather permitting. Alex had reached the rescue zone, but he still faced one more night alone on the mountain. That night, at the lower altitude, Alex slept better than he had in days. His headache diminished, his appetite began to return, and his cognitive function improved noticeably. The 2,000-foot descent had probably saved his life by reducing the altitude effects that were slowly killing him at his previous location. But Alex also knew that he had pushed his body to its absolute limits during the descent. He had used up nearly all of his physical and mental reserves reaching the rescue zone. If helicopter extraction wasn't possible the next day, he wasn't sure he had the strength left for another major survival effort. As dawn broke on Saturday, October 14th, Alex Morrison prepared for what he hoped would be his final day alone in the Himalayas.
Saturday morning, October 14th, 2023, dawned clear and cold at the helicopter landing zone where Alex Morrison had spent his 5th night alone in the Himalayas. At 16,400 feet above sea level, the air was still dangerously thin, but the lower altitude had provided crucial relief from the life-threatening effects Alex had been experiencing during his 4 days above 18,000 feet. Alex's physical condition reflected the toll of 5 days surviving alone at extreme altitude. He had lost nearly 20 pounds. His face was gaunt and weathered from constant exposure to wind and cold, and his movements were slow and deliberate due to exhaustion and altitude effects. But he was alive, conscious, and had successfully navigated to a location where rescue was possible. At 7 a.m., Alex heard the sound that meant salvation. Helicopter rotors echoing across the mountain valleys. The rescue aircraft, a high-altitude helicopter specially equipped for operations in the Himalayas, was approaching his position under perfect weather conditions. Clear skies, minimal wind, and excellent visibility that would allow the pilot to execute the challenging high-altitude rescue operation. The helicopter that reached Alex was crewed by some of the most experienced high-altitude rescue pilots in the world. Captain Ang Dorje Sherpa, the pilot, had conducted over 200 helicopter rescues in the Himalayas, including several at altitudes above 20,000 feet. His crew included a flight engineer and a rescue specialist trained in high-altitude medical emergencies. The rescue operation itself was a masterpiece of precision flying and technical skill. At 16,400 feet, the air is so thin that helicopter performance is severely limited, and even small errors in judgment can result in crashes that would kill everyone involved. Captain Dorje had to land on a small, sloping snow platform barely large enough for the aircraft, while managing the effects of altitude on both his helicopter's performance and his own cognitive abilities. Alex Morrison called the rescue specialist as the helicopter touched down and the crew quickly moved toward him. "We're here to take you home." Alex's response was barely audible over the helicopter noise, but his relief was obvious. "I never thought I'd be so happy to see anyone in my life," he managed to say as rescue personnel helped him toward the aircraft. The rescue team immediately began emergency medical assessment of Alex's condition. Rescue medic Dr. Pema Sherpa, a physician trained in high-altitude medicine, was amazed by Alex's condition considering his 5-day ordeal. "Considering what you've been through, you're in remarkably good shape," Dr. Sherpa told Alex as they secured him in the helicopter. The helicopter flight to Kathmandu took 45 minutes, during which the medical team worked to stabilize Alex's condition and prepare him for more comprehensive treatment at lower altitude. Alex remained conscious throughout the flight, though he was clearly exhausted and still showing effects from his extended time at extreme altitude. Dr. Sarah Chen, the emergency physician who treated Alex at Kathmandu's teaching hospital, later described his condition as a textbook example of successful high-altitude survival. Alex was suffering from moderate dehydration, significant weight loss, and altitude-related symptoms, but he had avoided the serious complications like pulmonary edema, cerebral edema, or severe frostbite that often kill mountaineers in similar situations. Alex's mountaineering experience and survival training were crucial to his survival, Dr. Chen explained to reporters.
He made consistently good decisions under extreme stress, managed his resources effectively, and never gave up hope even when his situation seemed hopeless. The rescue operation had involved over 30 personnel from multiple agencies, including Nepalese military helicopters, international mountain rescue teams, and medical specialists. The cost exceeded $100,000, but as rescue coordinator Major Pemba Sherpa pointed out, no amount of money is too much to save a human life, especially when that person has shown such courage and determination to survive. Recovery took Alex 10 days in Kathmandu, as his body readjusted to normal altitude and he regained the weight and strength he had lost during his ordeal. The most difficult aspect of recovery was processing the emotional trauma of his experience and the loss of his teammate Maria Santos, whose death had been confirmed during the rescue operation. 3 weeks later, Alex returned to Seattle, where he had become something of a celebrity among the mountaineering community. His detailed account of survival techniques at extreme altitude became valuable training material for high-altitude rescue operations and mountaineering education programs worldwide. Alex's most important contribution came through his work with the Mountain Rescue Association to improve communication and emergency protocols for high-altitude expeditions. His experience demonstrated both the importance of redundant emergency equipment and the need for improved search and rescue procedures in remote mountain areas. The 5 days I spent alone in the Himalayas changed my perspective on everything, Alex reflected during a climbing safety seminar 6 months after his rescue. I learned that the human body and mind are capable of enduring far more than we think possible. But I also learned that mountains don't care about your experience or preparation. Respect for the environment and careful planning can save your life, but sometimes survival comes down to luck and the determination to never give up. When asked what kept him going during the most difficult moments of his ordeal, Alex's answer reflected both his mountaineering philosophy and his personal values. I had people at home who were counting on me to come back safely. My parents, my girlfriend Sarah, my climbing partners, they were all depending on me to use everything I had learned to survive and make it home. I wasn't going to let them down, and I wasn't going to let the mountain win. Alex never returned to Amadablam, but he continued mountaineering with enhanced safety protocols and deeper appreciation for the risks inherent in high-altitude climbing. Those 5 days in the death zone taught me that survival often comes down to the intersection of preparation, skill, and determination. You can't control the weather or prevent equipment failures, but you can control how well you prepare and how hard you're willing to fight to stay alive.
This story, like all the stories we share on Hold On Survival Stories, demonstrates that survival in the world's most dangerous places requires more than just luck. It demands the perfect combination of preparation, skill, and an unbreakable will to live. Alex Morrison's 5 Days Alone in the Himalayas shows us how mountaineering expertise can become life-saving knowledge, but only when combined with the mental strength to make good decisions under extreme stress. The heroes of this story include not just Alex himself, but the rescue teams who risked their lives flying helicopters at deadly altitudes, the search coordinators who never gave up looking for the missing climber, and the medical professionals who provided life-saving treatment. Perhaps most importantly, this story honors the memory of Maria Santos, whose death reminds us that even the most experienced mountaineers can fall victim to the unforgiving forces of high-altitude climbing. Alex's story teaches us that expertise and technical knowledge are valuable survival tools, but they're only effective when combined with careful resource management, sound decision-making under pressure,
and the refusal to give up when faced with seemingly impossible odds. His mountaineering background helped him navigate technical terrain and manage altitude effects, but it was his determination to see his loved ones again that carried him through the psychological challenges of 5 days alone in the death zone. Most importantly, Alex's story shows us that even in the most remote and dangerous places on Earth, even when we're completely cut off from human contact and facing forces that can kill us in minutes, there's always reason to hold on. There are always people searching for us, always rescue techniques that can reach even the most impossible locations, and always hope for another day with the people we love. But before we go, I want to ask you some important questions. Have you ever pushed yourself to physical or mental limits that taught you something about your own capabilities? If you were alone for 5 days in extreme conditions, what mental strategies would you use to maintain hope and motivation? And here's a crucial one for anyone who enjoys outdoor adventures. Do you have the skills, equipment, and emergency preparations needed to survive if your next outdoor trip goes wrong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own stories of extreme outdoor challenges or preparation strategies that have kept you safe during adventures. Your experience might help someone else who finds themselves in their own survival situation where every decision matters. If this story inspired you or taught you something about the importance of preparation and never giving up, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps us bring you more incredible survival stories every week and helps us honor the courage of people like Alex who show us what the human spirit can accomplish when everything seems impossible. Thank you for listening to Hold On Survival Stories. Stay safe, stay prepared, and remember, you're stronger than you know, and the will to survive can overcome even the most dangerous places.